Ground Zero to Fukushima safe cleanup lessons we must learn. The haunting echoes of the September 11, 2011 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City reverberated across the globe, serving as a grim reminder of the fragility of human life and the devastating impact of disaster. The attacks caused the collapse of the Twin Towers, releasing vast amounts of toxic debris. In this episode, I'm uncovering how the release of this hazardous debris into the surrounding areas was bad enough, but making matters worse, proper cleanup controls were not put in place or exercised to help minimize exposure to the brave first responders and cleanup workers. To this day, many are still feeling and suffering the consequences. Yet, as the world grappled with the aftermath of this tragedy, another crisis was unfolding on the shores of Fukushima, Japan, one that would once again thrust the importance of safe cleanup practices into the spotlight. In March 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was rocked by a catastrophic meltdown following a powerful earthquake and tsunami. As Japan scrambled to contain the fallout and prevent further catastrophe, the parallels to the 9/11's cleanup efforts were undeniable. Once again, brave responders and volunteers found themselves on the front lines, battling not only the physical destruction wrought by nature, but also the invisible threat of secondary exposure to hazardous materials. As the years passed, studies began to emerge, painting a grim picture of the long-term health consequences faced by those involved in both the 9/11, Ground Zero, and Fukushima cleanup efforts. Much like their counterparts in New York City, responders in Japan experienced elevated rates of respiratory illnesses, cancer, and other debilitating conditions, all linked to exposure to hazardous material contaminants. The tragic irony of these parallel crises cannot be ignored. In both cases, the urgency to restore normalcy and reduce further harm led to rushed, often unsafe cleanup practices, ultimately magnifying the risks faced by those on the front lines. Yet, amidst the devastation, there is hope, the realization that we have the power to prevent such tragedies from recurring. The lessons learned from Ground Zero and Fukushima serve as a clear and loud call for change. We must prioritize safety and sustainability in all aspects of disaster response and recovery, from the immediate aftermath to long-term remediation efforts. This means moving from the use of everyday clothing and paper dust masks, which are typically used cleaning up disaster debris, into defensive practices of wearing disposable paper, Tyvek suits, and half-face respirators with proper filters, and in the worst conditions, using full-face, powered air personal respirators and decontamination showers. This not only ensures the cleanup workers' safety and protection, but also prevents workers carrying toxic substances off-site on their clothing and exposing others outside the cleanup zone, which can include their families and loved ones. This also means embracing innovative solutions like the right green coatings, which offer a safer, more effective alternative to traditional cleanup methods. By first locking down, securing, and controlling hazardous materials with the simple application of the right green coatings prior to handling or moving it, we can minimize the risk of secondary exposure and its devastating consequences. The right green coatings from GEI Global Encasement Incorporated were used in a limited capacity at both Ground Zero and Fukushima, which controlled exposure to workers and the surrounding environment in areas they were applied. Here are the education points. Learn from the tragedies of 9/11 and Fukushima. Prioritize safe cleanup practices. Parallel between 9/11 and Fukushima cleanup efforts underscores the need for safer solutions. Secondary exposure after disasters like 9/11 and Fukushima poses significant health risks. The right green coatings offer a simple yet effective way to lock down hazardous materials. Safer cleanup techniques like the right green coatings can prevent future harm and protect responders. To sum it up, whether it's asbestos-laden debris in lower Manhattan or toxic debris containing radioactive contamination in Fukushima, the principles remain the same: prioritize human health, protect the environment, and prevent future harm. As we reflect on the legacies of 9/11 and Fukushima, let us not dwell on the tragedies themselves, but rather on the lessons they impart. Let us honor the sacrifice of those who bravely responded in the face of unimaginable adversity by committing ourselves to a future where disasters are met with intelligent decisions, resilience, compassion, and above all, a steadfast dedication to safety. Together, we can build a world where tragedies like Ground Zero and Fukushima are never repeated, and where every community has the tools and knowledge to recover, rebuild, and thrive. You may like this quote from Daisaku Ikeda: Japanese Buddhist philosopher, educator, author, and poet. There are no greater treasures than the highest human qualities such as compassion, courage, and hope. Not even tragic accident or disaster can destroy such treasures of the heart. What are your questions about this episode? We are always here to help and excited to answer them. Thank you for listening, and see you on my next episode.